we are. We're going to talk about special needs learners. And Denise and I had a real nice conversation before we had about 20 minutes of trying to figure out technology about a bunch of things. And sometimes, you know, we think there might be something amiss with our child, or maybe there's something wrong with our child. But it could just be, especially if our children were in the public school system and are coming home, it could just be a detox problem. What do you think about that, Denise? Anything you want to share? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The whole deschooling situation is a real deal. Coming out of the school system, the kids have been conditioned to listen to their teacher. My second daughter had a real problem with this, and she was in second grade when I pulled her. I just want to give that for reference. She was only 7, 8 years old, something like that. And her thing was she would tell me, "You're not my teacher. My teacher said this. My teacher said that." And there was a real attitude that we had to get through. So I stopped academics. I actually stopped it completely. I was in North Carolina, so there's the prerequisite. And I wasn't in Pennsylvania, so I didn't have those extra stressors. But we took a couple months and just focused on character development. And there was no Facebook. You know, this was early 2000s when I was going through this. And I think there was MySpace. Remember MySpace?
Yes, actually, I do.
And it really wasn't that big of a thing. But I would surf the net and look for free character development tools. And I found a lot of super dry material. But anyway, we dove into it. And, you know, we said, if we're not going to accomplish anything, we're going to accomplish Bible. And we focused on character traits, and we would go through a character, I think it was a week, because there was a lot of Bible verses. And slowly but surely, the girls started developing perseverance. They started developing respect. They started developing the want-to, the motivation, which a lot of our public school kids do not have. Right around third grade, you start seeing motivation for actual learning to disappear. Now, they might learn material, they might memorize, but the passion for learning is being squelched slowly but surely. So we had to reignite that passion, and it took some time. And the girls had to really start looking at me as more than their mom. I was their mentor. I was the one who was directing the ship, so to speak. And I started giving them more, we wanted to develop a stakeholder. You know, what do you want to learn about? And they had to see learning as more than just ABC 1, 2, 3, and learning about, you know, what is it? Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. That's literally the only thing I remember about Columbus. But my girls could tell you more because they wanted to learn about him in a more holistic way, which I didn't get. I didn't get that in public school. I literally, seriously, that's all I know. 1492, he sailed the ocean blue. That's it. But
yeah. And with all that, there's so many options too, you know, like trying to cram the kids into the one box. And this is how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I got into, which is so helpful for any type of learner that's auditory or just likes to be busy when they're working. We got a lot of story hours, your story hours. We have a Columbus thing on that, but we have many different historical books on that. And they, you know, they play or do dolls or Legos or color or whatever. They're just playing, and they would just, even when it wasn't school time, they would throw those in, you know, to keep their mind occupied or whatever when they were doing whatever it was that they were doing. and they just are listening to the stuff and taking it in, you know, and that's, you know, outside the box.
Absolutely. And learning how to educate outside the box, especially if you have a learner who doesn't learn in the, I think I'm going to go outside, learn in the
Okay.
most normal, you know, how we suppose normal is way. I would do school outside. You know, we lived in sunny North Carolina, and right around this time of year, we would have 70 some odd degree weather. And it was just perfect to go outside and sit and read our stories. And then they could run around the yard a little bit. And then they would come back again to learn some more. We would do our ABCs on the wall, because I literally had to trick Nicole, my second daughter. I told you, she's the one who was like, you aren't my teacher. And I had to figure out ways to teach her, because she was not reading. She had an IEP. She didn't know a quarter from a dime. She had a lot of learning deficits that were quite severe, even at second grade. But I had this behavioral issue because she would not listen to me. She missed her friends at school. You know, not that she learned at school either, but she missed her friends at school, and she wanted to go to school so she could visit with her friends. And they said she would go to every desk and help all the other students, neglecting her own schoolwork. But this was her. So what we did was I would find ways to trick her into learning. We developed games. We painted ABCs rather than writing. We used a lot of normal household things. Rice, I would make a card, glue the letter on there. She could color the rice, and you know, she could put the rice on there. Then once it was dry, she could feel the rice in the letter B, and we could discuss B and the sound that B makes. And we started developing our own phonetic alphabet using tactile things, because she was a very tactile, hands-on learner. She was very kinesthetic in her learning style. She needed to move. So when we were memorizing scripture, she would do some jumping jacks. We would sing in cadence. My husband was in the military, so we would walk around the house or out in the yard or wherever, singing our scriptures in cadence. and that marching and that singing, that was how she had to learn, because she does not have a short-term memory. So we have to push everything into long-term memory. So a lot of memorization skills were necessary for her. So that is something that we had to learn to develop. And gradually, and it took her about 2 years. It was about a 2-year process for her to really embrace homeschooling. But she would learn things, and then when she discovered that she was learning it, and she was like, I learned something. And that gave her the the motivation that we want our children to have to learn more. And I'm like, okay, well, what character in history do you want to learn about? You know, we have to learn history, but what character in history do you want to learn about? And then she was like, well, what do you mean? That's a really broad picture. And so we would, you know, narrow it. It's like, okay, well, let's think about ancient history. You know, there's a lot going on in ancient history. So we could look at all the way from creation, go to Adam, or we could go further in, you know, and look at Caesar, Augustus, and Cleopatra, and all of that. And my girls really liked Egypt a lot. So we mummified a chicken. We did the crazy stuff. And they enjoyed it. We lost the chicken. We lost the tree. We found it several years later in the shed. It became a science project then. It's raining. I came outside and it started to rain. I was like, ah.
So one of the things I wanted to mention to y'all out there, if you're listening to this, is these processes are not fast. You're not going to have a quick fix
Call the dog
when
in.
you're working with your child. You know, so it's going to take a long time. Whether your child is a struggling learner or you're a struggling learner, the light bulb doesn't always go on the instant you explain it. You know, and sometimes it just takes a very, very, very long time for it to click, and sometimes it might not even, or you might not be around when it does click. So I just want you to understand that there's some endurance and perseverance that needs to happen in these situations, mamas, when you're homeschooling. And, you know, sometimes you're not going to see the fruit for a long time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep going.
Absolutely. I've talked to another parent. Her daughter was on the autism spectrum, and she was asking me, her daughter was approaching the high school ages, you know, getting closer to 18. And I told her, I didn't graduate my oldest until 21. I didn't think she was ready. And I was like, it's a longer road. Parenting for special needs, especially a diagnosed special needs, is generally a longer road, and pacing yourself is pretty important. Stamina can get hard, and sometimes you have to take time to replenish yourself. You know, it can be pretty complicated. You can start falling into that comparison trap game. You know, and homeschool moms, we're notorious for beating ourselves up. You know, so-and-so knows calculus and mine can barely multiply. Well, I got to stop and think, I can barely multiply, okay? I can barely multiply. I'm a functioning adult. And it's okay. I don't have to know calculus. And if your child is not a math child, they don't need to know calculus either. And it's okay. And it's okay if they don't. It's okay if if all you know about Columbus is that he sailed the ocean blue in 1482.
1942. Oh,
14.
Middle of World War II.
And it's okay. I mean, seriously, we can get through life without knowing the details. And what do we remember? What do you remember from biology yourself? I mean, seriously. So we don't need to be beating ourselves up if our child has struggles in one area or struggling in several areas. What have they gained over the course of the year? If your child is struggling in reading, and a lot of them are, reading and math is pretty important, and it's an area that a lot of our students are struggling in. So we need to stop and say, okay, do we have the foundations for our mathematics? They will not be able to multiply if they cannot add and subtract. So it is okay to stop and say, okay, I need to focus on the real problem. They need to have their addition and subtraction. And when you're sitting down with your evaluator, remember, Mom and Dad, that all you have to prove is that education has happened. You're showing that they're working on this situation. And the evaluator, if they're a good one, they'll look at that and say, you have shown me that you have been working on these mathematical facts. And there's several that, you know, I think if you're baking and cooking, there's your division. You're going to be incorporating your algebraic concepts in your baking and your cooking. If you're shopping in the grocery store and you have a coupons, mom, coupons, give them to your child. Ask them to figure out how much is the savings. These are real skills that benefit your child, and I would say this is really a great tool to go. Don't go shopping by yourself. Take your kids. Now, be smart. I went during the middle of the day when nobody was there, and I understood that I was going to spend the day at the grocery store. But it's good for the kid. And I also would talk to them about, okay, now we have this coupon, and it's a quarter off of, I don't know, maybe 3. You have to buy 3 items to get that quarter. How many do you actually need? And is the off-brand actually cheaper if you take the coupon off the name brand? Because sometimes the off-brand is still a better savings than that coupon.
Yeah.
And I would quiz my girls and say, okay, now, did we actually save money here? And sometimes they have to take their pen and paper. Nowadays, you could take your phone and use a calculator and go ahead and figure that out. And take some, okay, if we didn't save money with the coupon, do we need to use the coupon? No, we'll leave it for some other idiot. We can save our money and we'll just go with the yeah.
So, and that's the thing. I think so many of us, I think this is, I mean, for any mom who's teaching, but don't get so hung up on the academics that you forget about the life skills. You want your children to be able to function. You know, like you said in our previous episode, if you got to take the first month and teach them how to put their pants on or get them to put their pants on their own, then that's what you do. And that is the learning that happens. So depending on where your child is at and what your child's needs are, that's what you work on. And it is learning. All, you know, anything that they can understand and know over here that they didn't understand and know over here or able to do is learning. All learning. Like you said, it doesn't have to be calculus, it doesn't have to be biology, but there is learning happening. So I think there's so many life skills now. We get all caught up in, teach to the test and be able to do the test or whatever, that we forget how to do laundry, how to wash the dishes, how to bake, how to go to the store and make wise choices, how to, buy a car, whatever. So, training your child to be able to function well as an adult as possible is really, I mean, that's way more valuable. And good character, like you said, building good character, that foundation of good character is way more important than knowing lots of shapes and figures and events and things that happen.
Absolutely. As homeschoolers, we're building adults. So we're not necessarily getting them, our goal is not necessarily getting them into college. I mean, college might not be the place they need to go. Increasingly, college shouldn't be the goal. They can get some real skills. I mean, we need more plumbers. We need we need builders to build our homes. We need people that do those hands-on things. And guess what, people? They pay just as well. Sometimes better than more educated. Yeah. So we need to be realistic. What is the end goal here? You want to have a functioning adult, someone who can leave the home, not live in your basement, and be able to marry and have their own children if that's where God's directing them. Maybe they're going to college, maybe they're not. The functioning independent adult, that's what we want to look at. So when you're looking at your 6-year-old, you need to also start considering that from the beginning. That 6-year-old can help around the house. So it shouldn't be just on mom to clean the home. If they're bouncing around a lot, they can bounce while they're wiping windows. That's something that they can do. They don't need to sit to do school. They can stand to do school. If they need to bounce, they might need a break. A lot of our children who are diagnosed with ADHD, I think they just need to move more. It could be a real diagnosis. It might not. A lot of our kids are being medicated who don't need to be medicated. And in schools, you see these big, gigantic rubber bands that they put on the chairs so the kids can push on. They're still required to sit. Or they have a special seat that they sit on. It helps give them some vestibular movement. But they're still required to sit. You can do that at home too. Those things are available on Amazon. Or you could just get a Fizzo ball and let them sit on the ball. You can give them multiple breaks throughout the day. You can begin with movement. Yeah, there's Go Noodle. That's a fun thing that you can find on YouTube. They have the movement. I'd be careful. Some of them have yoga in it. So I'd be careful of what you choose. But I mean, there's movement that you can incorporate throughout your day. And guess what? PE. and so you've taken care of a couple of things already that are required by this lovely state, and incorporate a lot of field trips. We did tons and tons of field trips. My middle daughter, like I like to talk about, she was very social, so I didn't know what to do as a new homeschooler in North Carolina. So I found homeschool groups to go on field trips with. And we started that was our history back then, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have money for curriculum. And Facebook was not a thing. I think I established that already. And finding groups was a little bit more difficult. So we went off with, I called them the dress ladies. They were people that wore dresses and they were playing, and we found dresses to try to mix in and went with them on field trips, and it was lovely. And the girls got to meet other homeschoolers, and then they realized that they weren't the only ones. That pretty we thought we were a little weird. Thankfully, homeschooling is a lot more mainstream now, and it's easier to find groups. Maybe a little hard right now during COVID world, but I mean, we're starting to get out and be around, especially with the nicer weather. So you're going to find social groups, PE. There's groups that do drama. It is a little harder, and I did want to talk about socialization if you wanted to.
Go ahead, right into
It
that.
can be a little bit harder if you have a child with special needs. One of the things that I found was difficult was my girls were not at the same level academically with their same age peer groups. And that made co-op very difficult to go to, because wherever the teenagers were, they were doing the calculus, they were doing the biology, they were doing those high academic things. And when my older girls were going up through, there wasn't any other co-ops around, especially with special needs. And then if I did meet homeschooling special needs, it was a different kind of special needs. There were a lot more physical things. There were a lot more intellectual disability things going there. And so it was hard to find our niche. We did find that when we moved to Pennsylvania, thankfully. So that was really nice to find that social need that we had when we came up here. But that can be a little bit different. And so when a special needs mama talks about what about socialization, it's a completely different question for her when she's exploring homeschooling, because she is looking for that, well, my child with autism doesn't know how to interact with your neurotypical children and how to talk. So they need conversation practice. What I did was I would go to the gentler, kinder kids my daughter's age and say, hey, you know, my daughter would like to know how to do a conversation. Can you talk with her? And I would start the conversation, and at home we would practice. And what I would do with her is we would do worst case, best case scenarios. And I was pretty harsh with my daughter, because growing up in the 80s, I've seen some pretty harsh experiences with special needs. So I would make fun of her. And I was like, what if the kid said this and this and this to you? How would you react? Because they're going to need to know how to react to people who have no concept of kindness. Some people who, because you can't see the disability, they can be pretty mean. And she's worked at Hershey Park now, so she understands completely about how cruel people can be and how impatient folks can be when you are slower of speech. And so she's learned now how to handle those people, because she's been called stupid. She's been called retard. She's been called those things that are very mean and cruel. And she's been taught, thankfully, how to react without reacting as some folks with autism might react. Once they get to a certain age, mom and dad are not always there, and we want to avoid jail time.
Yeah, so that's a hard thing for a mom, especially if you're trying to create a safe place, for your child, not wanting to be the person who helps them practice those situations. However, if you want them to be able to engage others and navigate through life, you're going to have to do those hard things. Like, it would be really hard to, I don't know, to do some of that training at home, I would think, because you don't I don't know, you want to avoid the bad or whatever, but it's preparing them. That's part of preparing them for their life skills. And that would be, I could see that would be really challenging. I mean, I guess we all have to do that, because if there's mean people, there's bullies everywhere.
Yeah.
For everybody to handle it graciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Even reacting with the police officer. Now she drives a car. So what happens if you're pulled over by the police officer? You can't freak out. They'll think you're on drugs. So it's just like, okay, you can breathe. You can, and I said, if you feel comfortable, you can say, I'm on the spectrum, because she was in a car accident recently. And I was like, you can tell them, look, I'm feeling a little escalated, and I'm on the spectrum. She handled herself absolutely beautifully. I didn't need to do all of that stuff. But I was like, just in case, worst case scenario, if you're in a car and you have an accident, what are you going to do? Because they're going to say, what happened? And they're going to question you. And a person with autism feels stress at a much higher level than other people, neurotypical people. It can get really fast. It can get escalated really fast with the person with autism. So we need to teach our children on the spectrum, particularly, how to de-escalate, how to calm yourself. What are things that you need to do to get yourself under control so you can handle high stress situations? Because that cortisol is right up there. So she handled herself wonderfully. She spoke to the police officer. She took care of my mother, who, 80, I think she was 87 at the time, and just was navigating. Is like, okay, she needs to be seen. I'm okay. My body's up. I'm all right. The car's destroyed, but yeah. And just going through all of that made me feel much better about the time that we took to say, okay, worst case, best case, how do you handle people in authority? And you can speak up for yourself, but you got to modulate your voice in such a way that you're still showing respect. You don't get disrespectful with the police officer. You show them you show them your license or whatever. You speak to the doctor, when they turn 14. Can we talk about 14? Mom and dad, when your child turns 14, the doctor will want to separate your kid from you to talk to them about sex.
Yeah.
So if you have a child with special needs, it's going to happen. I mean, they don't care. They'll lock you suddenly out of their medical records. This happened to me twice. It didn't happen with Cecily, because I guess it's recent. But prepare your children to be able to talk to the doctor about how you want to be treated and how you want your mom and dad there with you to help you navigate that, because they're gonna do it. It's gonna happen. So there's so much that we got to prepare our children for. If your child is lower on the spectrum, lower functioning, you can go ahead and have that done for them before you even have to deal with it. But if they're higher functioning, and I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, I'm just being very clinical and blunt here. But if they're higher functioning and you think that they're going to one day be able to live on their own, this is what I'm talking about. Make sure that you're preparing your children for the eventuality of being questioned about their sexual orientation or their interactions with illegal, illicit drugs. And they're going to want to know about if they're promiscuous or not. And they will want to try to separate mom and dad from that situation, because they feel as though the child will speak more freely with them. So yeah.
Yeah. So all this, I mean, today's episode, what we're talking about really is kind of, don't worry about the academics, right? Just your job as a parent, really. Like, I mean, we really want to make sure that we're preparing our children for how to live and how to function, and that just needs to be the first thing, you know.
And you know, I think it goes for all parents, but you know, when you have a child with special needs, it seems to be more explicit. You have to be much more intentional in that situation, because it just comes at you. You know, people will question your abilities much more openly and in your face for homeschooling if you have a child with special needs, autism, intellectual disability, Down syndrome, any of those things, because they feel as though the experts should be the ones that handle that. Then, you know, I went to school for this, you know, we have been conditioned as Americans that it's the experts that take care of those things. I mean, I wouldn't go to you for my cancer, you know, and we have been conditioned to send our children at church off with the youth pastor. They're not necessarily the best people to send them to, honestly, anymore. And so we need to be much more aware. We need to be much more versed in our Bibles for our children's upbringing and growth, intellectually and spiritually. So we can't impart is my favorite quote from Heidi St. John. I gotta do it. We can't impart to our children things that we don't already own. Now, I've Denise-ified it, so it's not a direct quote, but
well, she quotes it out of Luke, and I can't remember the chapter and verse, but it's like, when a child, when it is full grown, it will be like a teacher.
Correct.
And that's in scripture, and that's what she's quoting it from.
Yeah, and so we can't give them what we don't already own. So, mom and dad, whatever you do, be in your Bible, be about the Lord's business. And if you're homeschooling, you're about the Lord's business, because this is our first ministry. I don't care what else you do. I don't care if you have a job outside the home. I don't care if you're in youth ministry. I don't care if you're a pastor. I don't care. Your first ministry is at home. So we need to be about the Lord's business and growing up our children. This is what's happening. Slowly but surely, our society is being infected with all kinds of heresies that are coming at us, and it's so, you can see it now. You know, the blinders have been torn off. We can see the evil now. They're not even hiding. So what we need to do is we need to gird up ourselves If that means you have to get up a half an hour earlier in the morning, do it. It's worth it. Your body will get used to it. It's miserable. I know, I get it. But you will eventually get used to it, and it'll be better, and it'll be precious. And then those babies will see you in your Bible, and they'll like, wow, that mom and dad really believe that stuff. And if you're doing Bible again with them, I had to turn off all electronics when my kids were small, and I put on a Christian radio. I had to fill my entire house with it. So I would be focused. It wasn't for them. I mean, they benefited, but I needed it. I had to keep fulfilling myself. I had to keep pouring into myself so I could pour out, because I was just pouring out daily. And that's what we do. So get your refreshment. I listen to about 3 or 4 podcasts every day just to keep pouring in. I'm starting to read all kinds of different books. That is something that we need to do, just to keep going and keeping going and keeping going, and get around like-minded people. So if that means calling another homeschooler, hanging out, meeting at the park during the day, whatever, that is something that will benefit you and your kids in the long run, because they'll develop those relationships, that those social, emotional tools will come in the playground. And sometimes you just have to put academics aside.
Yeah. Okay, it's like almost 2. I can't
Oh, wow.
believe it. So there's 2 more things I want to, well, we did start at 1:17 because of our technical difficulties. So it's really just a little over half an hour. But I want to wrap it up. We did talk about socialization and homeschool on the road. Let's touch on the last 2 things I have here. There's finding services for homeschooling. Now, I know we did not focus on academics a lot today, but if you wanted help with academics or service or some other type of services for your struggling learner, how do people go about that? What does that look like? Is there anything available out there for homeschoolers? What
There
do you
is.
suggest?
There is. In the private industry, in your insurance, unfortunately, academics, it would not be covered by insurance. So if you are looking for academic help with your learner, you could look towards your homeschool co-ops for tutors. I had a great young man come over, and he helped Cecily with her algebra. And it was just wonderful. I think she baked him cookies or something. I don't remember. But when I talk about services, I mean more of occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, behavioral therapies. All of those things can be found through your private insurance. So you'd have to check with your insurance for providers. Behavioral therapies are a little bit harder to get because there's not too many practitioners out there. I know my company that I work for, they have a stack of kids just waiting for a practitioner. And I'm offered at least monthly a couple kids, and I was like, I already have 11. I don't want any more. It's just too much. So, look at those things. Now, if you need help with behavioral therapies, you're probably a parent who's dealing with a kid who's having major meltdowns, who's throwing furniture, who's destroying your house. I mean, these are the kind of behaviors that I'm talking about. Physical therapy is just like a mobility thing. And your doctors will generally be the first ones who will mention it. Occupational therapy, if your kid has been in the public system and they've already had those services. Now, I know that there is some legislation going through right now that are talking about us being able to access the public schools for those things. I would investigate that and make sure that that's not just academics, because I don't know. It could be just academics. I would be much more interested in it if it involved the therapy. than I would the academics. Because honestly, homeschooling world, we have all of the academic stuff. You don't have to worry about that. Sports, maybe. I didn't get involved in sports, so I don't know anything about it. But the therapy.
I saw a quote about that law that they're trying to get in there, and that, well, between doing band and stuff like that and coming in and doing your allowable classes, you might spend a whole day in the school. And I was like, ah. I was like, no.
Yeah. Interested in
not what I'm looking for. But
gives them more of a chance to indoctrinate your child and actually start dictating more of what they want us to teach. So I'm not interested in the public squares education academics at all. I know some that financially are interested in that, but I still say you can find things for free. I'm just like that.
Yeah, there's free options out there.
Check your insurance. Check your insurance for therapies and whatnot. They're available. Okay. It's harder once they get school age, though. It really is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then the last thing we're going to wrap up. It's 2 of 2. It's 158. So post graduation, do you like you said with your daughter, you didn't graduate until she was 21. I mean, you took as long as you felt was absolutely necessary to prepare her properly. So mom, it's okay. Don't get stuck on the, it's got to be by 18 kind of thing. Just, you do what your child needs. So you've taken the time, you've done the training, you've done the preparation, you get to the point where, okay, I think graduation, we can do this graduation thing. Then what?
Well, then you want to look at vocation. Sometimes you need to look at whether or not you want the child to find employment or go into school on their own. Now, does your child need supports at school, and are they planning to go to school? So my daughter wanted to go to HAC, and they had a special program, but she had not been diagnosed since she was 6. So believe this or not, a diagnosis of autism needs to be reevaluated every 6 months. So what we had to do was we had to go through the entire process, have her re-diagnosed, so she could get services. That was educational supports, differentiating curriculum, that's tweaking the curriculum to help your child learn, and extended time periods for some of her academics. Colleges, a lot of them will support someone with intellectual disability or autism or some sort of other diagnosis. But you really do need to have that diagnosis current. It was a circus and a circle, and we started with intellectual disability because the autism side was full and there was a huge waiting list. So we said, you know what, we'll have them look at her to see if she has intellectual disability. We'll have that crossed off, but we're in the system. So we had to learn how to work the system to get where we needed to go. It took us, I would say it took us a good year to get through all of that so we could get her into OVR, which is Pennsylvania specific, as occupational vocational rehabilitation. And that was just to get the supports so she could get some help in school. Then we also used it for therapeutic learning how to drive a car. And OVR can also help you find a job to varying degrees of success, not success. Cecily finally landed her job and car using private ways of doing that. Good. She got her driver's license using Shield Driving School, private. paid for through her own money. And she landed her job. She works at Giant grocery store, and she got that on her own as well. Yeah, and she didn't advertise that she was on the spectrum. She just got it of her own cognizance.
Good for her. That's great. So the options are out there, but they might not be as readily as available as you would want them to be, and they actually might even not help you that much.
There's you got to weigh your options and see, how special is my child? I mean, those are some of the things, like, does my child really need these supports, or are these supports, are they going to benefit my child? And really think about that critically, because we want the best for our child. Currently, my daughter has supports, and I'm looking at it going, they really haven't done much. We did a lot of the work already. I mean, she has a lot of the skills that we embedded already. So is this really worth it? So think about that very, very critically, and wonder, is like, okay, is my child, once they graduate, are they going to be able to live on their own? If not, then you're going to have to think about group home. Group homes are, again, double-edged sword. Is the child going to stay with family? And are you sure about that? Because our children will end up with our children, if that makes sense. Will their spouse and their children's children be acceptable of that sibling? So some of our individuals will need a lot of care as they get older. Now, my brother is on the spectrum. He is intellectually disabled. His intellect lands him about a 3-year-old mentality. He is in a group home. I don't think we could bring him home. His behaviors are such that I don't think he could function well here. And honestly, I don't think we could handle it. So we have to think about those things as well. And it's hard, because it makes you want to cry. And those are things that when we are dealing with our children, that's when we think about what we need to work with it within the system, and how we are going to handle the future. Those are the things that we really need to think about as we're bringing up our children with disabilities. What are those disabilities? Where does this land a child? Be realistic and honest with yourself. Will they be able to live on their own without me? Because one day I'm not going to be around, and my other daughters won't be around. Who's going to be there for the child? For my brother, who's going to be there for him once all those other factors, mom and dad, are gone and the sisters are gone? There's where we have to leave that. And yeah, that's pretty heavy. I didn't mean to end it.
Well, it is something to consider. Obviously there's all these things to think of and pray over. And God brought you together as a family. God has a plan. I'm not saying I understand it. I'm not saying there's parts inside of me that I don't agree. But it's the way God has his plan working out. And he's perfect. He's good. His plan is perfect. And when you, like you said earlier, when you spend that time filling yourself with his word and building your relationship with him and your trust in him, you just keep looking to him for the answers, for the guidance, for the endurance, for the help. And it's that close relationship with him that's going to help you endure all that needs to be endured, and to pour into your children all that needs to be poured in. So I think if that foundation's not there, oh my, I mean, yeah, it would be it's devastating without that relationship with Christ first. So yeah, and honestly, all these things are things we need to think about. You know, the interactions with the kids in the playground, how you're going to respond, and what's going to happen to you as you grow up. And it's not all going to be sunshine and roses, but it is stuff that needs our time. And I think in our society, we don't take time. We don't take time to process. We don't take time to think, consider. We take time to plan fun things for the next whatever, but to take time to mull over those things that might not be sunshine and roses, I don't know that we do that a lot. I could be wrong, but I think Denise is frozen. She hasn't moved for a while. So I'm very glad that you came on with me today, Denise. I don't know if you're frozen where you are, but you're frozen where I am. So Denise and I just talked today about special needs and helping our children. And honestly, mamas out there, first of all, work on your relationship with Jesus. Second of all, bring your children into that. And more important than your academics is teaching your child good life skills and how to function as an adult. And you have to evaluate that for your child and where your child is at. A lot of ADD things, ADHD things, consider movement, kinesthetic learning, not paperwork, you know, things that get your child moving. You could see the ADD disappear if your child is able to move and be free in that way. That could be huge. So I just want to encourage you, mamas, there is support out there. There are people who want to help you, and your family is what God designed it to be. So trust him in that. Search through his word nonstop. Keep it in your heart. Keep your eyes focused on him and seek him for help. We had an episode a few weeks back. If you missed it, you might want to listen to that and get some help and tips there. Denise, I was very glad that you were on. You're still frozen, so I'm just going to say thank you.